So what we're going to do today, we're going to go a bit deeper into the Sharp Plus tool. I will start by explaining what it is, because I know some of you that are joining this webinar already know a little bit this tool and what we're doing, but some of you do not. So I'm going to introduce this and start this webinar with what is Sharp Plus tool. So my name is Sirin Johnston, and I'm working in OIN, based in VHQ in Rome, and I'm the main coordinator of the Sharp Plus tool. Then we're going to go on what's new in Sharp Plus, because in these last 3 years we have developed a lot of new products that we can that we give to the projects with which we're working. So this will be presented by Lucille Lepers, who is working actively with me in the Sharp Plus team and focusing mainly on communication. Then we will have 3 different speakers that will introduce what we have done or how we have adapted the tool recently. So the first one will be Antoine Lemaitre, who is a farming system and resilience specialist working with the Sharp Plus team, but also with the World Agricultural Watch based in VHQ. And he will be presenting how we have identified farming system typologies using Sharp Plus. Then Rumbidzai Enduro from ESP, who is a gender equality and women's empowerment specialist, will present you a bit how we have explored further gender dynamics using the Sharp Plus tool. So we have also worked closely recently to further adapt the tool and further explore gender dynamics. And then we will end with Annabelle Burrow, who is a behavioral change specialist in 2 different GEF programs based in the agroecology team in NSP, who will show you how we have analyzed behavior change using Sharp Plus. So with this, I will continue, and I will briefly present you what is Sharp Plus. So first of all, Sharp Plus stands for Self-Evaluation and Holistic Assessment of Climate Resilience of Farmers and Pastoralists. So what it is a tool that has been developed by FAO in 2014, which is used to assess resilience with a modular approach and a holistic understanding of the agroecosystem. So this holistic understanding means it focuses on different aspects or dimensions of the farming systems. For example, the environmental dimension, such as well as the economic, social, governance, and so on. Then we collect data at the household level through a digital survey using Kobo Toolbox, because it's very easily usable, user-friendly, free of charge, and in open access. At the household level, meaning we interview one person in the household, ideally someone that has a good understanding of the farming system and household understudy. Then we have an automatic analysis of resilience scores. So I will explain you in the next slides how we do this, but we have automatically results on resilience scores, which helps us to identify which aspects of the farming system are less resilient or vulnerable. So what comes out of the tool? It's basically an understanding of the vulnerability factors of the farming system and household understudy, to also understand the current adaptive capacities of farmers. So with these 2, we understand more the weaknesses, but also the strengths within the agroecosystem, to then identify prioritized actions to support resilience. So where has it been implemented? It has been implemented in over 45 countries. On this map, you can see more or less where it has been implemented the 10 last years. So we see that it has been implemented on almost every continent, and this is due to the strong adaptability of the tool. So we could really adapt it to all of these different contexts to make it context specific and also to make it relevant to all of these different geographical areas. So why is it interesting to use Sharp Plus? First of all, as I said before, is to identify the aspects of the farming system in need of intervention. So what should we do, for example, at the beginning of the project or during the project formulation? What activities, what interventions should we carry on in the field? Then, as I just said now, to inform the design of project activities, we can also use it to monitor and evaluate the resilience and adaptive capacities of the involved population, and all of this to design inclusive and holistic solutions for enhancing farmers' livelihoods and climate resilience. So briefly, when to implement it. So we can implement it, as I said before, during the formulation of the project. So this is to identify priorities and objectives to guide project formulation. We can also use it as a baseline at the beginning of a project. So there again, to identify priorities and guide action, but also for monitoring and evaluation. And then we can use it during and after the intervention of the activities. And this is mainly to evaluate the progress towards the targeted indicators for monitoring and evaluation. And this is usually the different, this is basically when we implement the tool. So beginning, midterm, and line. Not always, sometimes it's only once, but this is more or less what happens. So just to go briefly in the survey was developed on 13 resilience indicators. So I don't have the time to present them to you today, but if you're interested, it's the paper from Cabell and Alonso that has been published in 2012. So these are 13 indicators that need to be present in an agro-ecosystem for it to be resilient. Then we have transported these indicators into 3 domains and 30 modules to make it more user-friendly, less conceptual, and also to be able to understand easily the results. So here you can see the current domains and modules. So we have the social domain, environmental domain, and economic domain, and we have all the different modules. So a module is simply a set of questions that focuses on one specific aspect of the farming system. So you can see, for example, in the social domain, we have access to information and communication technologies, and so on. And in the environmental domain, we have crop production, livestock production, weed species, pest management, and so on. So just to show you that the tool is holistic and we focus on all of these domains. Some of them are mandatory, that you see with a little star. Some of them are not, according to the context and the objective of a project. And then into each domain, we assess 2 kinds of components. The first one is the technical one, which is scored on a score ranging from 0 to 10. And this is are questions that try to grasp factual information, external technical information. So as an example, maybe what kind of crop species do you have? Like it's factual, we grow this, and this crop species. And then we also have a self-assessed adequacy component, also scored from 0 to 10. And this tries to grasp the perceived satisfaction of a given aspect of a system. So are you satisfied with this? So to have a half technical component, factual, and have the perceptions of farmers to see if they're satisfied. And with this, we calculate what we call the compound technical score just by summing the average of this technical component with the average of a self-assessed adequacy. And with this, we identify 3 different levels of resilience, so low, medium, and high. At the end, we also have a last module focusing on the importance. So this, we ask the farmers, according to you, what is important or what would need to be changed for you to increase your livelihoods, be more resilient, and so on. So open-ended questions really to understand, okay, according to farmers, what would they need? And then with this, we do automatic calculations of scores. So you can see on the x-axis, you can see the different modules that have been selected, and on the y-axis, the compound resilience score going from 0 to 20, and you can see the different levels of resilience. So for example, in this specific study, what has been identified with the low resilience score is financial services, and then you can go into this module to understand why was it not resilient, or why did it have a low resilience level, and to then better understand it and target project interventions or recommendations. We also have statistical descriptive analysis of every single variable in the survey, such as here you can see the number of species that were that farmers had in the farming system disaggregated at the farmers group level. And there we could see the type of crop production system. It's just an example, but we have a lot of descriptive analysis to better understand the context in the field. So then we, as I said before, we also do further in-depth analysis. So we have the farming system typologies, gender dynamics, behavior change analysis that will be presented today, and also in all the generic versions of the tool. So in every single version of the tool, we also focus on nutrition with the household diversity score, so the HDS score, which is a score developed also by FAO, as well as the FIS, which is the food insecurity experience scale. So I will now hand over to Lucille and stop sharing my screen. Thank you very much for listening.
So I'm going to present you today what's new in Sharp, because some of you might have already implemented the tool, or some of you might be just discovering it right now. So today we're going to talk of the dashboard, the reports, and the fact sheets. So first of all, the big novelty of the Sharp Plus methodology is the use of an automatic and interactive dashboard. So this dashboard allows for improved information management because it is both a database and it also do key analysis with all information available in one file with a different disaggregation level. It is also optimal for accessibility and user-friendly because it can be both accessed online and offline. And it's also very good for transparency because there is no black box in the process. Since all data is available, it is always possible to look back in the database and understand where scores have been calculated. And finally, it also ensures optimal data protection and security, since it's an Excel file that is only shared with the project stakeholders. So now let's look a bit more into what the dashboard looks like. So first of all, there is you can see in the bottom of the screen here that is organized by different tabs. So now we're going to look at the tab on main resilience. So here you can see the disaggregation level. In this situation, it's with the farmer producer organization, but it can also be by governorates or region or farm typology. And what we see in this slide are the key resilience graphs. So the one per domain. So we can see here that there are 4 domains because they used to be 4, but now the governance domain has been included in the economic one. Then we can see the same graph that Céline presented earlier with all the different modules. So in this specific case, we can see that there is low resilience for 1 module and high resilience for 5 modules. Then the resilience score per geographical unit. So this also allow for visual comparison between the different groups. Like for instance, here we see that one group is ranking with a significantly lower resilience score than the rest of the groups on crop production. And finally, the share of resilience per module for the entire sample. So this allows to also see when data is not available. For instance, in the case of the module on government policy, we can see that a large majority was not able to, did not have their score calculated because they were not aware of any government program impacting their farming system. So when we look a bit deeper into the different modules, here's an example of the module access to market. So we can see that there are different components. First of all, the description of the module. So here we have key information related to the module and why it is relevant when assessing resilience. We can also see here the overall resilience score, again disaggregated between technical and adequacy score. And then we see the result disaggregated per geographical unit, farm type, or farmer-producer organization, depending on the disaggregation level. And then the key findings here, which are automatically calculated depending on the scores. Then we also have an overview of the sub-indicators of the technical score, so the factual information of the modules. So here we can see that for access to market, we look at the ability of farmers to sell products, whether they're organized in to sell, etc., etc. So here we can see, for instance, that the sub-indicators that mainly drove the score down were the lack of certification or low and fluctuating price. And then if we keep going further, we have now all the descriptive analysis with the table and all the results with the corresponding graphs. And finally, each module also end up with the adequacy question, previously mentioned by Céline, which assess the satisfaction of the farmer regarding this aspect of their farming system. So here, their access to market. So then, on top of the dashboard, the SHARP methodology also include a comprehensive report. So the structure of the report is usually ranging around 50, 60 pages, and really provides an in-depth understanding of the resilient situation of the farming household. So it usually starts with an overview of the resilience scores, and then the profiling of the livelihood with a really descriptive analysis, and also an analysis of the gender dynamics, such as and also some recommendation to improve resilience in this specific area. So this report can be published if desired, but it's not always the case, and it depends on the project needs and yeah. And finally, after the report, we also have a fact sheet, so which summarize the finding in 2-3 pages to capture in a snapshot the resilience situation, and this fact sheet also allows wider dissemination for also non-technical audiences, and it is automatically published in the FAO knowledge repository as part of the methodology. So here are some examples of the SHARP related content that you might find on the FAO Innovation X account, which is the X account under which the tool is hosted, the Office of Innovation. So that's all for the novelty. And if you're curious to learn more, here are some of the QR code and some of the content that you can access, and we're going to put everything in the chat. Thanks a lot, and now I'm going to hand it to Antoine.
Okay, so now moving on to building farming system typologies using SHARP+. So why building farm typologies? We know that given the extensive heterogeneity of farming farms, general policy prescriptions are unlikely to be useful or appropriate to all farmers. And in this regard, we need to create public policies and investment strategies that are tailored to the different forms of farming. And we do this by taking into account their different needs, assets, and constraints. The World Agriculture Watch, or the WOW, is an international initiative with a secretariat hosted by FAO, and they offer an harmonized approach to examine, analyze, and monitor the agricultural transformation around the world, and to identify patterns and drivers of change of these transformations, in order to create tools to help tailoring public policies and investment strategies in the frame of the adaptation to climate change, the agroecological transitions, and the social inclusion. So this is the approach that is used within SHARP+ to create farm typologies. So farm typologies can be used, first of all, to create an initial assessment of the farm diversity by creating categories of farms in terms of structures and functioning. And this allows to make a descriptive analysis of the farm's types, asset practices, and household living conditions. And also to find assets and practices as drivers of better performances. So like economic performances or also yields, for example. and it also includes environmental performances and resilience. And secondly, typologies can also be used for monitoring, to track the evolution of farming structures and practices over time, and also to monitor the project impacts on farming systems, household livelihood, and resilience. And finally, to identify drivers and patterns of agricultural transformation. Now I'm going to present to you an example of a farm typology that we built for 8 provinces of Turkey. So if we take our total number of farms that are surveyed, which is 1,055, the first criteria that has been identified to differentiate the farms is the size. We can see on the right that we have the large farms with more than 40 hectares, and on the left we have the small and medium farms. The second criteria identified was linked to the livestock, with on the right we had farms with very large livestock, with more than 10 tropical livestock units. And on the left, we have farms with small livestock or no livestock at all. And the following criteria were linked to the diversification of the farms. Firstly, in terms of the number of crops cultivated. On the right, we have the farms with more than at least 3 crops cultivated. And on the left, we have here a group with the specialized farms with less than 3 crops cultivated. And we also have a criteria linked to the economic diversification and the number of income sources. On the right, we have at least 2 income sources, and on the left, only 1. So from these criteria, we can build 6 different types of farms. They are all significantly different within each other. And from there, for example, if we look at the farm type distribution, we can know that the type 2 is the most prominent. So type 2 are small and medium farms with no or small livestock and are specialized in terms of crops, but are economically diversified. And from this point, we can look at the different characteristics of all the types. And for example, looking at the ability of farms to save money, we can see that type 1 has only 17% of the farmers that declare being able to save money, whereas the type 6 has 43%. So we can see here very significant differences. And then coming back to resilience. Here we can also identify and evaluate the resilience capacity of each type by looking at the average of the total module scores. So as you know, it's from 0 to 20. And for example, the type 1 has a score of 9.8. And we can see very significant differences between the types, with type 6 having 10.9 and type 5 10.7. And the same with if we take an example of the module access to information, we have only 10 for type 1 and 11.7 for type 6, where types 5 and 6 shows higher access to sustainable resource management information and adaptation practices. And we can also create a mapping of these types. For example, here it's for our 8 provinces in Turkey. And if we look at the region here on the right of Sanliurfa, we can see that the type 1 is prominent. And so with more than 50% of the farm belonging to the type 1. And we know that type 1 is the less economically performant and also the least resilient. Whereas, for example, for the region of Konya, we know that we can see that type 1 is almost absent, and the type 5 and 6 are the most prominent, and these types are the most resilient and economically performant. So these kind of map information are very important to take into consideration while building public policies. Thank you very much. And now moving on to Rombi.
So today I'd like to share with you the fruits of the collaboration between the Office of Innovation and the FAO Agenda team by presenting the ways in which the Sharp Plus tool has been incorporating various new indicators and underlying logics to help to generate new empirical evidence on the relationship between household resilience, climate, and gender. Next slide, please. So the current literature on the intersection between household resilience and climate change and gender has been showing a growing recognition of how gender dynamics influence adaptive capacities and vulnerabilities. So for example, last year, the FAO produced a report on unjust climate, and it showed how climate change disproportionately affects rural women and highlights how gender responsive resilient strategies are needed to address this. For example, for every year, female-headed households experience an income loss of 8% due to heat stress and 3% due to flood when comparing to their male counterparts. For all weather events, women increase the total number of hours per week relative to men because these events increase their weekly labor hours by 55 minutes. And then finally, the women also face systematic barriers due to discrimination and cultural gender norms when accessing productive assets such as land, credit, and climate-related information. This report, as well as the SWOF report published in 2023, demonstrates that resilience is not just about coping mechanisms, but also has to deal with underlying gender inequalities that exacerbate these vulnerabilities for women. So in order to enhance women's access to these kinds of resources, it's important to build equitable resilience for women and girls. Next slide, please. So while the original SHARP tool provides a comprehensive framework for assessing household resilience to climate change, we found in our initial analysis that the gender considerations were not fully integrated within the design. So this has led to some knowledge gaps that I'll outline here briefly. We have found that the original SHARP tool didn't explicitly measure aspects of women's agency. And here women's agency refers to women's capability to make independent choices and act upon them. So in this case, women, the tool doesn't address measures of a household level decision-making and access to information. And this is important to understand because this is how household resilience is enhanced. Secondly, the tool doesn't quite have sufficient focus on access to resources and services. Much research has shown that rural women have challenges in owning assets and be able to make decisions about them. So this is one of the gaps that the original SHARP tool needs to address when wanting to understand resilience building. And then and to add to that, in particular, land tenure and access is an important way in which women are able to address their lack of resilience. And within the original SHARP tool, this gap means that we're not able to capture the gendered dynamic of land access and tenure and resilience. Then thirdly, with regards to time allocation, it's clear from the research that women all over the world allocate their daily time differently, and this is because of norms and expectations that increase their overall time burden. So within the new SHARP tool, it's important that we address this gap by adequately assessing how time use affects resilience capabilities and responses to climate shocks. And then lastly, while the tool collects data that can be disaggregated by sex, it doesn't systematically collect it on how resilience indicators differ between male and female-headed households. Next slide, please. Recognizing these gaps, the new SHARP tool was developed to provide a more gender-responsive assessment to climate resilience. So in doing so, it integrates these gender considerations by including modules that have to do with women's agency and decision-making, as well as access to productive resources and participation. Today, due to time, I'll only focus on women's agencies and decision-making dynamics. But as you can, it's important to mention here that additionally, the tool also makes other improvements by including clearer questions on the division of labor across several modules, as I've outlined here. Next slide, please. So to look a little bit more deeply at some of these modules that address women's agency and decision-making, we do so in module 27, looking at decision-making within the household. So we ask these questions where respondents give answers as to what decisions were made regarding the following aspects in a household's life and who had the final say in this decision. So we asked them additionally who in the household makes them, if it was men only or women only or both of them simultaneously, and as well to what extent did they feel that they could participate in these decisions. And as you can tell, we have provided them with a list of various kinds of activities or articles that they can be able to answer their questions to. Next slide, please. Secondly, with regards to decision-making, we also ask about farm-related activities. So again, we ask them who had the final say in the decision carried out according to the activities listed. And again, it's important to ask who in the household made and to what extent they felt that they could make these decisions. Next slide, please. And then an important element, as I outlined earlier, is time use. So we do so by collecting data using the time use diary module, using a 24-hour recall period. So we ask them in the last 24 hours how much time they engaged in according to these different activities, some having to do with employment, some having to do with leisure, others having to do with unpaid domestic care and housework. And then we total all of those numbers and ensure that it equals to 24 hours. Next slide, please. And then lastly, just to highlight issues to do with land access, because among rural women, this is an important element to decipher in terms of how they allocate their time. So we ask them what access they have to different kinds of land, depending on where they stay, and what rights they have to use the land and who's the owner of those pieces of land. So this can help us to further understand how land is accessed and what kind of the strength of the tenure that they have to that piece of land. Next slide, please. And then lastly, I'd like to outline some potential avenues in which we can use this newly collected gender disaggregated data within the SHARP Plus framework. So it offers us this opportunity to engage in further empirical research from which we can analyze these gender dynamics using SHARP Plus. So firstly, a descriptive analysis is in order where we examine how resilience components differ between male and female headed households. We're also interested in seeing if we can construct a kind of specific index, much like the WIA index, so we can quantify women's empowerment in different farming households. And of course, you can disaggregate by the different typologies and also do a kind of mapping. And in doing so, we'd be integrating gender dimensions of resilience. Thirdly, we're also interested in investigating how women allocate their time and their labor, and if this has an impact on how resilient households are. And then lastly, it would be very interesting if you could evaluate how access to different kinds of assets, including extension services and information, can differ between male and female-headed households, and if that has an impact on how households are resilient to climatic and non-climatic shocks.
Okay, so hello also from my side. I'm Annabelle Burrow. I work for the agroecology team at NSP, and within the Dryland Sustainable Landscapes Impact Program, or in short DSLIP, which is a GEF 7 program, we've integrated a behavioral science assessment into the SHARP Plus tool, and this is what I'll be presenting today. So basically what we've been doing is bridging the gap between the what that is assessed in the SHARP Plus tool to the why. Just to briefly present the program here, you can see the Dryland Sustainable Landscapes Impact Program works across 11 countries in drylands, and 7 of these are led by FAO. So these are placed in sub-Saharan Africa. You could see them here. Each of them focuses on a different so-called core theme. So talking with behavioral sciences terms, this means target behavior. And the DSLIP aims to reach land degradation neutrality, so to really build resilient landscapes, but also focusing on livelihoods. So we want to restore degraded lands, but we also want to improve livelihoods and improve resilience. And this cannot happen in a top-down manner. So basically for this, we need to really understand what is happening in the landscapes and what is affecting people's livelihoods and what do they need. And for this, the DSLIP developed the Integrated Landscape Assessment Methodology, or in short, ELAM. We like to use a lot of acronyms in this program. And ELAM basically connects data from different levels. So we have data from the geospatial level down to the household level. And on the household level is where the SHARP Plus tool was implemented. And here we integrated the behavioral change assessment into the Sharp Plus tool to leverage on enumerators already going in on the field to assess data for M&E purposes and to be able to gather data on behavioral change to also tailor project implementation. So with this, just as a brief overview again, the what and the why is how we always present it. So Sharp Plus looks at what is happening, what practices are being applied currently by farmers. And then with this integrated behavioral science assessment, we look at the why. So why are they applying certain practices or why are they not? And then this helps us to tailor the project interventions to be able to address the barriers towards sustainable management of landscapes. So how do we do this? Basically, we've developed this behavioral change assessment based on the COM-B model. It's a model from behavioral sciences that synthesizes 19 different frameworks from different applications of behavioral sciences. And it's used across different UN institutions because it's really it's a good synthesis of all the different factors and determinants of behavior. So COM-B, it stands for capability, opportunity, and motivation. And you can see here on the wheel, I won't read everything out, but this splits out into a lot of different, still like more detailed determinants of behavior. And I think we all know also that behavior can be very complex because all of us at some point maybe wanted to change our behavior. And we can see that it's not just as easy as knowing that something is right or wrong and that we should drink less alcohol or we should eat more vegetables. There's also a lot of other barriers towards actually changing our behavior. And this is what we want to look into at farm level as well. What is actually blocking farmers from applying specific sustainable practices apart from maybe just not knowing about them? And we start off by separating the respondents into doers and non-doers. So are they already applying the specific target behavior? Yes or no? This could be, for example, intercropping or the cultivation of a specific drought-resilient crop such as millet. And then for each of these groups of respondents, we look into different dynamics within capability, motivation, and opportunity. So why are they already applying this practice or why are they not? What challenges are they presented with when they apply these practices? What benefits do they observe? Would they potentially be interested in it? So we can see all these different dynamics within these two groups and analyze based on this. And we can also still use different levels of disaggregation, such as producer organizations or gender was presented before, to see even more nuances within the dynamics of the respondents, to see what is blocking them or actually pushing them towards the application of this behavior. Also allowing us to address different dynamics within different groups, such as, for example, gender dynamics. So this provides us with information on the application, which is useful for many purposes. So we can see at the beginning of the program, are farmers already applying this practice, yes or no? At the end, are there more farmers applying it? But it also helps us to really identify the main incentives and communicate these. For example, as in the form of farmer field schools, we can address this in the curricula. And if there's farmers that have seen a lot of benefits, maybe we can also bring them in and say, okay, these are very knowledgeable farmers. They can maybe show other farmers the benefits that they have been seeing through the application of this practice, addressing potential misconceptions of these behaviors. We can address these barriers and also then just address the capacity needs that we identified through this. And maybe just generally as the way this is structured, we have more open-ended questions with regards to what are the barriers, what are the motivations. We try to really have farmers openly communicate what they say, but of course it's within Kobo, so we still need to select specific answer options and in the end also need to quantify the results. So here's just an example of how these results can look like. It's really just a snapshot of the broad results that we get normally from the assessment. This is from the country project in Namibia looking into the target behavior of intercropping. And these different colors of the columns, they stand for producer organizations. So this is disaggregated by producer organization. And what we can see here is that the observed benefits of intercropping among doers are really also, apart from diversification, increased yields and increased land use efficiency. So those that are already engaged in this practice see these benefits actively on their fields. Whereas when we look at, or we ask those that are not yet applying intercropping, several of them also addressed the aspect of low yields or insufficient land as one of the barriers for not applying this practice. So this tells us, okay, so actually, once farmers apply this practice, they actually see these positive benefits, but it's one of the main, or it's among main barriers for farmers not to apply it. So we can address this misconception, for example, in farmer field schools or through communication materials. We can bring in the farmers that have seen these positive practices and show others that are still reluctant that with the right application practices, we can also actually get better yields. And we can also assess further in depth through follow-up assessments what are the specific practices among these farmers that have led to increased yields and the positive impacts. And here's just a brief example of how we integrate these results into other results within ELAM. So it's just this level of geospatial analysis where we can see different levels of degradation in this map. And we can overlay this with the data from Sharp+. And so we can see not only the patterns of degradation within the landscape, but also how this links to behavior and to the resilience scores. So it's an interesting way of not just looking at what is happening in the landscape, but also why, which then also helps us to further tailor the interventions on the ground. And then just briefly to present, because we go one step further from what to why to how. So once we've addressed what is happening and why, we look into how can we address this basically, and not just how can we address it, but also how can we communicate it in a clear and realistic manner. And for this, we use the visual narratives, which is based on the framework of agroecology with the 10 elements that were accepted by all 197 FAO countries. And it's basically a theory of change which allows us to look at transformations towards sustainable landscapes in a very integrated and systems thinking approach. And we can integrate the behavioral science findings here into these narratives. Let me just show an example for the behavioral, for the DSLIP, sorry. We use the biodiversity nexus. And these are basically nexuses that were developed in multi-stakeholder regional workshops to look at how does change normally happen. And then we can use the insights from Sharp and we can use the insights from the behavioral science to say, along these arrows, we can see barriers here or there, we see a lever here, and it really allows us to not just look at isolated parts of the production landscape, but also to really think about how the whole thing comes together. And I don't think I have much time left to really explain this more in depth, but there's different publications that also showcase how these visual narratives work and how they help to communicate the results from Sharp Plus and from different assessments to different stakeholders that are relevant. And you can have a look here. I think Céline will share the slides afterwards. You'll have the link to the 2 publications. And I just included one last presentation slide here showing how we visualize this. So you can see here, it's the first entry point for diversity. And you can see, for example, here we identified that many female-headed households face barriers with regards to access to seeds, which prohibits them from cultivating millet. But we also identified that there are many women that have a lot of knowledge on seed reproduction, which we can leverage on. So it's basically just a way of simplifying the complex findings and these long reports that we have with Sharp Plus and the behavioral change assessment in a more playful and accessible manner, and then having project implementers, but also policy stakeholders being able to access the information in this way. So that's it from my side, and I hand back over to Céline. Thanks a lot.